Hey, what's up, YouTube? Welcome back. I'm super excited to have you guys here today. Today, I'm going to be talking about part of my testimony. I'm not going to talk about the whole thing, but I actually want to focus on one relationship, the one before I left to Vermont. It was honestly my most promising relationship leading to marriage, but my lack of boundaries is really what caused that relationship to end. It really caused that relationship not to go past when I moved to Vermont. I tried to do the long distance thing, but for somebody that doesn't have boundaries and somebody that just didn't understand love at the time, there was no way that it was going to work out. So today we're talking about boundaries and relationships. To me, this is one of the most important things in a relationship that you need. You need to find out who you are, and you need to find out what's your limits and the things that you're interested in. So today I'm going to talk about how I had no boundaries going into that relationship to start with. That was the longest time I was single prior to that relationship, which was 6 months. Me and this girl, I think we met twice, once in college, and then we met at my job, and we actually messaged each other at the same time. So, me over here thinking like, oh, it's meant to be, and I'm like, this is the girl I'm going to marry. Her parents were super cool brother. I was like, yep, this is the one. And then come to find out 6 months later, this is after fornicating. This is after just pouring my heart out, just spending most of our days together, all this stuff just coming into one. And when it ended, it was just such a toxic breakup, and not really because of her, because she was actually way better at relationships than I was, to be honest. But it turned out bad because, like I said, I had no boundaries. So when I went to Vermont, I didn't put what I needed to put in the relationship for it to work. And that was one of the hardest things to realize now, is how much damage I did just to her, and honestly all my relationships before that. So the biggest thing that I'm here to say is that boundaries are important. You need to have boundaries. You need to know when to say no. But so the whole point is, don't ruin your next relationship. If it's the girl that you think you're going to marry, it is very possible that it is. Just you need to make sure you know yourself first. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of the story. It was literally the most lovey-dovey, most beautiful relationship I had. It was such a great thing. And I met her parents before we started dating. We went on a date. And then from there, everything just kind of kicked off, and I met the rest of her family, very welcoming, very loving. The first time I experienced somebody loving me for who I was and being able to just go out in the open and just like kind of just express how I felt. But the hardest thing that at that time for me was actually drinking and boundaries. For me, I had no boundaries. Every time somebody offered me a drink, I would say yes. When I turned 21 in that relationship, I brought beers to the house every single day, and I was just drinking every single day. And at first, I just thought this is a normal thing that normal 21-year-olds do. But the thing is, if you drink every day, you never realize how much damage you're doing to your future and how much damage you're doing to your relationship. At most of the time in that relationship, I was either drunk or I was tipsy, or I was just thinking about when's the next drink is coming. And when we went to Jamaica, that was when I really realized I actually had a problem. Well, I didn't realize it because I was kind of drunk the whole time. But later on, in like a couple months later, I finally realized that was one of my biggest issues, was drinking. And when we got to Jamaica, the first thing I did, we got to the hotel. I was like, all right, I got my first drink. And for the next 7 days, I was just drinking in and out, drinking more than my girlfriend at the time, drinking more than her parents. Just really just acting a fool, not having any boundaries. And that's the thing. When you don't have boundaries and you start drinking, you just don't ever see an end to it. You're just like, oh, next drink, next drink, next drink. And you just keep going off of that. And it really got to the point where I just never even realized I was addicted to alcohol. And it was such a hard thing for me to realize later on. When I tried to quit, every time I saw a lime, I would be thinking of tequila. And every time I saw tequila, I'll be thinking of a lime. And that was just my favorite drink. And I always wanted to go back to it. But once you realize that you have a problem, you just don't want to go back to it because you get trapped in that hole again. So like I said, boundaries is the biggest thing here. You have to realize where your weaknesses are. You have to realize the things that you struggle with, and you just have to be open and honest about them. Being addicted to alcohol in that time, it really damaged my relationship, because when you're drunk, the feelings that you feel aren't always authentic, or they're enhanced, and you just don't have control over them. And control is something that you need in order to keep the relationship stable and to continue to keep it going. You have to always put thought, you have to put effort into a relationship. You really have to make sacrifices. A lot of people are in relationships now where they say like, oh, if you don't do this, like, you're counted out. And that was who I was. She was asking me to quit paintball, or to reduce my time playing paintball, or to grow up. And I would just tell her like, I'm never growing up. And with that mentality, there was no way I would have survived marriage. And that's why it's just so important to just know yourself first, and you have to understand that going into a relationship just isn't having a title of boyfriend and girlfriend. It's actually going into the relationship and talking about your personal life, the things that you have done, and actually starting to build each other up. There's relationships I see where people are just knocking each other down constantly, and they're just kind of going back and forth, or they're letting alcohol just kind of control their relationship. And they just drink together, they have sex together, and that's just all that they're focused on. But when you do that, you just don't get the time to really get to know the person for who they are. And a lot of people don't have the goal of marriage anymore. So I feel like for me, in these past 7 years of dating, I never really looked for marriage anymore. I never really expected one girlfriend to become my wife until they always said you would know who the one is. But when you're drinking, you don't get to, you really don't get to see that person for who they are. You don't get to really get to know them. And when you jump right into sex, your feelings just, you guys become one unit. You guys become one person. And when you do that, it's just you take their traits and their personality, and you don't even know who the person is fully yet. Emotionally, you don't know who they are. Mentally, you don't know what their weaknesses are. You don't know what their strengths are. Sometimes you don't even know what they want to do in life. And that is okay for them not to know what they want to do, but you're not there to give them purpose. You're not there to make them make them understand who they are. That's their job before the relationship. So that was one of my biggest struggles, and that actually related to all my relationships. It was a very tough thing for me to kind of split up, was who I was and who the relationship was. Every time I kind of thought the girl was going to give me this genius idea, or I thought that the girl was going to just be a compliment to me to help me grow into what I'm going to be. But if I didn't know who I was and I didn't know what my goals were, how can I have somebody try to help me get there? You're going to cause a lot of frustration. You're going to cause a lot of fights and a lot of arguments. And that's just one of the biggest things that's breaking up relationships these days. And people don't even know why it's happening. But I'm telling you right now that the lack of boundaries, the lack of vision, the lack of sacrifice is really what's ending these relationships. And that's why I thought to make this YouTube is just to expose bad relationships, expose what we are doing wrong. And that's, like I said, bad boundaries was my biggest thing. A lot of drinking was my second worst thing. And I think my third thing was just jumping into sex within the first 2 months. And I think a lot of people take sex for granted, society makes it think it's okay to do, but really it's not. Sex is, like I said, it brings you guys together, it brings you guys into one unit, and when you do that, you're supposed to be bound in marriage. And I know that a lot of parents, a lot of people always say wait until you get married, but they never tell you why. And it's because every time you have sex with somebody, you have a soul tie. Damage that it does to you when you break yourselves apart, you're just hurting yourself for the next person, and eventually you get to a point where you feel a numbness. And I truly believe that in my heart. I believe that with everything that I've seen, with all these marriages failing, I always look at why are they failing? I come from a family of divorce. I come from a family of bad relationships, and the first thing I see most of the time is just bad communication. People don't know how to say no. People don't know they don't know who they are yet. They're still trying to figure themselves out. And that's one of the most damaging things. And I just know that that's a big reason for all these relationships ending now. And you have to realize that my whole testimony, all my boundary problems, all the sex I was doing, all this stuff, all the drinking, it all got taken away when I accepted Jesus into my life. And that was the biggest thing for me, is that Jesus had that victory. And that was the biggest turning point for me, the biggest time where I just realized my past was just not okay and it wasn't healthy. And there's so many people I see nowadays in those situations, and I don't judge them because I was in that same boat, but I try to help them now. But I see a lot of people just trying to turn away and trying to do their own thing as in if they knew the answer to the situation that they're in, but they really don't, and they're just afraid to ask for help. And that's what comes with this generation right now. And that's why I think it's just so important to build community. It's so important to have God in your life. It's so important to read the Bible to find out how you're supposed to be acting in life, so that you don't damage yourself and you don't continue to damage other people in this world and continue to send them to have rough marriages where they are just thinking of you, or where you're thinking of them in your marriage. The whole point is really just to get it right the first time, and just continue to have a marriage that has vision, a marriage that has growth, a marriage that has things that you guys are going to be able to build each other up on, and just knowing each other's weaknesses and strengths and being able to spend life together. Too many times now we see where people are just having divorces left and right, and it's just such a hurtful thing for me, because I experienced it in my life, and in my household right now there was almost another divorce. And to see them coming back together, to show them, to be kind of showing them what true love is, and to be able to talk to them about it is really what kind of keeps me going, and it continues to make me strive for that marriage, to strive for a marriage that has all of me and all of them together, and trusting them 100%. People are never going to be perfect, and I think that's one of the biggest things you guys have to realize in your relationship. As long as you are growing in a positive way, I feel like that's just the most important thing. And the biggest thing for my life in the past 8 months has been that turning from who I was to who I am now. So I thank you guys for watching this video. This was great to have you guys, and I'm super excited to see you guys next week for part 2 of this testimony. Thank you guys, and have a great night or day or whatever it's called. Dab.